Hallo und willkommen, ich bin Meister Lenze and you're watching Get Germanized. Very American things you'll be surprised you didn't know.
I am bored. What should I do?
Ich weiß.
Get Germanized.
So due to the fact that most of my viewers are American, or many at least, and that I visited America last year, namely Georgia. Yeah, why Georgia? Because it's beautiful. Well, parts of it are, and the people are beautiful. This is not the topic of this video though. I found this article while doing research for another video called 21 Very American Things You'll Be Surprised You Didn't Know, and we're gonna go through some of the points mentioned here, and I'll tell you guys my opinion because I went to the US and I was like, let's see about this. First up, the classic bald eagle screech is actually a red-tailed hawk. Bald eagle screeches are kind of weak. I don't even know what a bald eagle sounds like, to be honest. We don't have them in Germany. Abraham Lincoln is in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. He's what? Wait a second. As a 22-year-old, Lincoln was described as able to outrun, outlift, outwrestle, and throw down any man in Sangamon County, Illinois. In one match, the future president reportedly became angered by his opponent's attempt to cheat, so he used his long arms to pick the opponent up by the throat and shake him around. Wait, what? Abraham Lincoln did this? Okay, article. You got me with this one. Next up, Uncle Sam was a real person named Samuel Wilson. Oh, well, I always thought he was made up, so let's see who this Samuel Wilson is. He was a meat packer in Troy, New York, who fought in the American Revolution and became the official meat inspector for the Northern Army in the War of 1812. Wilson was well known in Troy for his meat business and for his friendliness, and over time was given the nickname Uncle Sam. When Wilson started providing and inspecting meat for the troops during the War of 1812, the troops of Troy would joke that the US label on the meat barrels actually stood for Uncle Sam. This idea was then eventually expanded to all United States military items with US, and so Uncle Sam became the figurehead of American might. Fat chance for that to happen, seriously, wow. That's cool, I didn't know that. Next up, the firstborns of the Budweiser family were made to taste the beer before their mother's milk. Even in Germany, the country of beer, that would be very strange. The Anheuser-Busch company, Anheuser sounds German actually, was passed from father to son for 5 generations. It was so much a family company that each firstborn son was required to taste its beer before anything else, including the mother's milk. More recently, Budweiser, or rather the Anheuser-Busch Koss Inc. was bought by Belgium-based InBev. Nobody has followed up to see if the InBev children will be required to partake in this tradition. That's fantastic. Stories only life can write. Next up, the 7th inning stretch may have accidentally been created by Howard Taft. William Howard Taft, governor of the Philippine territory, seated on a water buffalo. Although this may just be a legend, the story goes that President Taft was attending a baseball game and over the course of the game became increasingly uncomfortable in his small wooden chair. Taft was a very large man and eventually couldn't take being confined to this small space anymore, so in the 7th inning he stood up to stretch his legs. Thinking that the president was about to leave, the rest of the audience also rose to show respect. Taft eventually sat back down and the audience joined him, thus created the 7th inning stretch, at least according to law. In that game, Taft also became the first president to throw the ceremonial first pitch. Last year, the Washington Nationals added Taft to its roster of racing presidents. Okay, I didn't even know what that stretch thing was until now, so that's very interesting. To hear the story behind something you didn't even know existed. Next up, the Mall of America is owned by Canadians. Who would have thought? The Mall of America, located in Bloomington, Minnesota, is actually owned by the 555 Group, which is based in Edmonton, Canada. The Canadian group also came up with the idea and designed the place, so this was never wholly an American mall, despite the name and embodiment of the American principles and access and commerce. Canada is, of course, in the continent of North America, so there's that. Well, I suppose still interesting because it looks very American, you know, the whole mall and if you know the logo and stuff like that. Interesting, I didn't know that. Next up, July 2nd is actually the real American Independence Day. What? Okay. The Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia actually voted to approve a resolution of independence on July 2nd. And later that day, the Pennsylvania Evening Post published, "This day, the Continental Congress declared the United Colonies free and independent states." July 4th is when the Congress adopted the official Declaration of the Independence, although most people didn't even sign it until around early August. Philadelphia didn't celebrate the Declaration until July 8th. The Continental Army didn't find out until the 9th, and England had no idea until August 30th. At the time, John Adams even said, "The 2nd of July, 1776, will be the most memorable time in history of America." Interesting, so everyone's celebrating it on the wrong day? That's kind of funny. Number 8. John Quincy Adams and Theodore Roosevelt skinny dipped in the Potomac River frequently. Well, I guess they're just people. I guess it's fun to skinny. I have never actually done it, but I imagine it's fun. Although skinny dipping in the Washington D.C. stretch of the Potomac nowadays would be a bad time. Why is it so dirty? Both presidents, John Quincy Adams and Theodore Roosevelt, loved to do so back in the day. In Roosevelt's own words, "If we swam the Potomac, we usually took off our clothes." Fair enough. These actually weren't the only presidents that loved swimming naked, as FDR, Kennedy, Johnson, and Carter were also reportedly fans. Really? Next up, the Statue of Liberty has Morton's toe. Where like the toe next to the big toe is longer than the big toe. Okay. Morton's toe is when, your second toe is longer than your first big toe. This was an idealized form of Greek sculpture, and that's why the Statue of Liberty has a fairly common condition. Interesting. I didn't know that. Next up, there's a desk full of candy on the floor of the US Senate. Well, I just realized I could just buy candy for myself, but that's good to know when should I be ever there. The candy desk is an ongoing tradition that was started in 1968 by California Senator George Murphy, who would keep his desk full of candy despite a no eating rule on the floor. Oh, naughty rebel, I like. Since then, the tradition has been continued. Currently, it's held by Illinois Senator Mark Kirk, who fills the desk with Illinois candy like Mars bars, Jelly Belly, and Wrigley's gum. I love Jelly Belly. Oh my god, it's probably one of my favorite candies. It's so unhealthy, but so good. Next up, Harry Truman's middle name is just S. Harry S. Truman, just S. Nothing else. Truman's parents couldn't decide on a middle name for little Harry, so they simply chose the letter S. This satisfied both of his grandfathers, Anderson Shipp Truman and Solomon Young. Well, I guess, it's still kind of mean. I don't want him to have your name, but I don't want him to have your name either. Let's just give him a letter as an okay, it sounds great to me. Next up, the Pledge of Allegiance was created by advertisers, and the inclusion of Under God is a product of the Red Scare. The Youth's Companion was a magazine that also supplied American flags to schools across the country near the end of the 19th century on September 8th, 1892. They published the pledge written by an employee of the mag to promote nationalism and presumably sell more flags and subscriptions. Holy shit. The pledge ended up taking off across the country, but over the years has undergone a few changes. Originally, the pledge involved a salute modeled after the classic Roman one, which Mussolini and Hitler ended up adopting as well. Holy shit. Obviously, that salute was dropped. Also, of the United States of America was added to make it clear to immigrants that they were pledging to the US. Under God was adding during the Red Scare. The Red Scare, I suppose, has something to do with communists and communism and like the Cold War, I guess. I don't know. Next up, of the 12 people who have walked the moon, 11 were Boy Scouts. Well, makes sense to me, right? Exploring, living in nature, in the wild. why not the moon? Along with those numbers, all 3 of the members of Apollo 13 were scouts back in the day. And since 1959, there have been 39 astronauts who were also Eagle Scouts. Makes sense to me. I mean, they're curious, they want to explore, right? Yeah. Next up, the state of Ohio was accidentally not admitted into the Union until 1953. Okay, accidentally. We don't like those bastards. It wasn't until 1953 that Ohio Congressman George H. Bender brought up a bill to the US Congress asking them to retroactively admit his state into the United States of America. Thomas Jefferson had approved the territory more than a century before during his tenure as a president. But due to an accidental oversight, the state had never been formally admitted. Congress approved Bender's bill, and now the official day Ohio became a state is March 1st, 1803, even if that's not exactly true. Alright. Interesting. Next up. Ellis Island actually didn't force any immigrants to Americanize their names. The popular story goes that many foreign-sounding last names, often Jewish or Irish, were changed by the immigration officers at Ellis Island to be more American and easier to pronounce in their new home. This is just a myth. Those officers were often immigrants themselves and had no such instructions to offer suggestions for name changes. Nobody has been able to find concrete evidence of a single name being forcefully changed at Ellis Island. This myth comes from the fact that many immigrants actually willingly changed their names before boarding their respective ships to America, where they'd have to fill out a name in the ship log. The only known name change to officially occur at Ellis Island was big news back in the day. Frank Woodhull was born a woman named Mary Johnson, but decided to make a new life for himself in America as a man, so he signed his ship log with a new name. Ellis Island allowed Frank to successfully come into the nation with his new life. That is awesome, that's pretty cool. I would imagine that maybe people just, didn't change their names willingly necessarily, but when they told their name to people, it sounded so foreign that they just adopted it wrongly and wrote it down wrongly, and maybe it was then transferred wrongly and then over and over, and so those names came into being. I don't know. Next up, the average NFL game has just 10 minutes and 43 seconds of televised gameplay. Really? The Wall Street Journal found that the actual amount of time the ball is in play during a televised football game is very, very short, totaling less than Meat Loaf's classic "I'd do anything for love, but I won't do that." Okay, weird comparison. Most of the time is spent with players standing around 67 minutes, while on average only 3 seconds is spent towards showing the cheerleaders. Still, sometimes there's plenty of action even when the ball isn't in play. But why would you watch? I'm sorry, I have never seen an NFL game, so I can't say anything about it, but that sounds ridiculous. Like, why would you sit there and watch the game that apparently goes over 70 minutes or something? I don't know, it's a long ass time. And if the ball is only in action for 10 minutes, explain that to me, please. Next up, Captain America is a first-generation Irish immigrant. Steve Rogers was born July 4th, 1920, which, as noted above, probably shouldn't actually be our Independence Day. Okay. To Irish immigrants Sarah and Joseph Rogers. He had an Irish Catholic, yeah, right, upbringing. According to 2010 census data, 11.2% of the US has an Irish heritage. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's common knowledge, I suppose. But for an immigrant to take up the name of Captain America is quite cool, I thought. Next up, the soil under a George Washington statue in England was shipped from the US in order to fulfill the president's vow never to stand on English soil after the American Revolution. Really? So they shipped in soil from... Alright, interesting. The US sent London some real American soil along with a statue of George Washington so that the president wouldn't have to stand on English soil. Isn't that kind of an insult? The Washington statue stands at the tourist-heavy Trafalgar Square. I have seen it then. Next up, you don't need a driver's license to compete in NASCAR. Wait, what? I just imagine like a young boy just going into one of the cars and drive. It doesn't matter. Technically, a state driver's license is not required to compete in NASCAR. In fact, multiple professional racers have had their licenses suspended but still have been able to compete. Kyle Busch had his license suspended for driving 128 miles per hour on a 45 miles per hour street, but was still allowed to race. Back in 2004, Scott Wimmer failed a breathalyzer test, but still competed in the Daytona 500 and other races. I imagine that's because those kind of people are more prone to speed and more prone to lose their license, and that's like $1 million business, right? The whole NASCAR thing. So the companies or the creators probably didn't want to risk losing money, and that's why they didn't make it a rule to have a driver's license. Kind of makes sense. Still kind of weird. Next up, the iconic Hollywood sign was originally supposed to be a temporary real estate marker. Where? Really? It says Hollywood Land here on the picture. Originally created in 1923, the iconic letters over Hollywood were originally put in place as an advertisement for the burgeoning real estate development below. It was originally only supposed to stay up for half a year. In the first version, the whole word Hollywood Land, like I just said, existed, but the land was taken out in 1949 when the City of Los Angeles Park Department took over the upkeep, and they just left it there. Well, it's a cool sign. And last but not least, Lyndon Johnson whipped out his Johnson frequently. Who's Lyndon Johnson? President Lyndon Johnson referred to his Johnson as Jumbo, okay, and had a propensity, that's a new word for me, to whip it out in front of colleagues at highly inappropriate times. Just imagine Trump or Obama doing that. You don't like what I have to say? Anyway, at least according to today's standards, it was inappropriate to today's standards. Johnson was also apparently jealous of Kennedy's reputation as a womanizer and set out to try to top him, having what his male aides referred to as a harem of mistresses and female colleagues he'd try and sometimes succeed to sleep with. America can be pretty weird sometimes, it says here then. Well, I mean, yeah. Win an argument, whip out your Johnson. That's how it works these days as well, right? Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little article review. Let me know what you think about everything I just said. Truly surprising things in there, to me at least. Maybe just because I'm German, I don't know. But yeah, I like the article, and if you did too, well, you know what to do. Also, check out my gaming channel on Twitch. It's called Get Germanized, so twitch.tv/getgermanized for gaming live streams, and check out my YouTube channel, Get Germanized Gaming, for the recorded versions of these live streams in better quality, and my Life the World YouTube channel about traveling and vlogs and life advice and all of that kind of stuff. And apart from that, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to get Germanized. Goodbye and auf Wiedersehen.